A lot of people think that building an apex roof on a shed is a notoriously difficult job. Well, in this video, I'm going to take away that difficulty. I'm going to teach you a really easy way to pitch your first ever apex roof. You'll learn how to identify and plan for the correct pitch, how to plan, mark out and create an accurate bird's mouth cut, the tricks behind installing a ridge beam and common rafters on your own, and so much more. And the best bit, by the end of this video, you'll have a stronger and cheaper shed roof than any of them sheds that you see pre-built in the local garden centre. Now the first job is to measure the run, so the width of the building here, and all you need for that is a tape measure. Remember, the aim of this is to do this with very simple tools. So I'm just going to measure the length of the building so that I know the overall run of it. And then I'm going to make a centre line on this top plate here, so I know the halfway point of the run of the roof. Now you might know how high you want that roof already, how much of a pitch you want on it. You might be following a plan. But most of us, if we're doing a DIY shed like this, are going to probably want to come in under 2.5 metres. That's what I want to do because I've got a neighbour within a metre over there against that fence, so I need to come in below 2.5. So I need a very low pitched roof. I'm going to aim for a 12-degree pitched roof, so that'll keep it nice and low. But how do we figure out what pitch we want? Because that's the hard bit, is actually knowing what pitch we want in the first place. Well, it helps if you can visualize it, and there's a little cheat that you can do that'll help you visualize it and work out the pitch. And all you need is a cheap string line. Remember, we're doing this with basic tools. The cheap tools you need for the job, they'll all be in the description below. So grab a string line and 3 screws, and I'll show you how I visualize and work out the pitch that I want. So I've popped a screw bang on my center line on the front of that wall plate there. Now, if you're doing this and you're going to clad this afterwards and you want to calculate for your roof pitch to come past your cladding, you need to account for the cladding or sheathing. And I've popped in 2 screws, you probably see on the drone shot, along the wall plates, and I've popped them 300mm back because that's at the moment a bit of a guess. When we get the string line on, we'll be able to visualize it. So if you look, I've got my screw on the center point, my string line runs around that screw, and it's 300mm down that wall plate, and I've got the same over that side. So what we've kind of replicated there, if you look, is the pitch that I think the roof wants to be. To get a visual representation of the pitch, get hold of that string line, lift up to where the peak of the roof would be, and you can see that replicates what our pitch would end up being. So it's the same as that length along that wall plate there. If we want to increase the pitch, all we do is take one of them screws out, move them further along. Of course, that would make the pitch go from a low pitch to a higher pitch, and this string line would end up coming up a lot higher. But how do we know exactly what the calculation is in degrees for that pitch? Now you need another simple, inexpensive tool that I'll link, and that is a speed square. This is your friend throughout this whole job. So if we grab our speed square, lay it flush against the edge of the timber there, we can slide that up and down if we want. Put it hard against the screw in the center line of our run, just there. And that isn't going to be perfect because this isn't right on the center of the ridge, but it'll be close enough for a shed. And it's going to tell us what our pitch is going to be. Now, what we've got there on the speed square is 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 degrees of pitch. Now, if we wanted to decrease that to 12, because if we wanted a 12-degree pitch, that would be easy to do. We'd move that screw that way. I haven't got enough hands, and that would decrease the pitch. If we wanted a larger pitch, we move the screw that way, and that would increase the pitch. I was aiming for 12 degrees, but I'm quite happy with that visually, so I've changed my mind. We're going with a 14-degree pitch. We don't need that string line anymore, that can go. Remember, 14 degrees of pitch, that's that key number that we need to remember throughout this. For me anyway, of course yours may well differ. And now we need to know what we're going to do with that 14 degrees. Well, this is where people find roofing really complicated. The good thing about these days, we've got these things, and there's an app that can help us. So I use this app, Essential Roofing app. I first saw this on the Skill Builder channel. I saw a guy called Dan Cox using this, and it's the easiest way. It takes out all the rigmarole of working out roofs, and I, to be honest, hate that part. So this makes things really easy. So the Essential Roofing app, and all you got to do, what we do is we put in the overall span on the app, which is 2796. We put in the ridge width. Now the ridge width, we're using 5x2s, so it's 45 mil, so 45 millimeters, and we put in the desired roof pitch. You can see how easy this is. So the desired roof pitch, 14 degrees. We press calculate, and that gives us a rafter length to work with. Now the rafter length, pop that there, rafters are them two bits that come down off the ridge, so you'll have a ridge beam in the middle, two rafters. So that tells us our rafter length. So now we know the rafter length. We don't need to do the ridge yet. Some people put the ridge in first. You can do if you want to. I like to cut a couple of these rafters before I do that, because I'll show you how you dummy it up once you've cut a couple, because you can make adjustments at that point. You don't want to go putting a ridge up, cutting loads of rafters. This is the time to make mistakes, especially if you're doing this for the first time. You want to cut a rafter, see what you get. I'll teach you to do that before we move on to any of the other steps. So I've got some lengths of 5x2. We're going to cut our first rafter. I've just realised though, some of you might not know how we got to that stage there. Well, if you want to see how to frame a super strong shed, there's a link in the description to the video where we built the base and where we built the shed, because this is a little mini series where you can learn to build a shed that's much cheaper than one in a garden centre. There's a picture that's going to pop up now from video 2, and not only is it going to be cheaper, it's going to be twice the strength and quality that'll last many years. So that's the aim of this little mini series. This is the roofing video. If you haven't seen the rest, go back. The links are in the description. Right, let's cut our first rafter. Like I say, this is the point where you learn, and if you make any mistakes, this is where you want to make them. And you can also then use this rafter as a pattern rafter, which will speed up the process. So we make one perfectly, and we then use it as a pattern. So there's only 2 or 3 simple hand tools we need for this bit. We're going to create our plumb cut first. So that's the cut that sits on the apex of that roof right against the center ridge beam. So what you do for the plumb cut is you grab your speed square, you place the pivot along the top edge. So this is the top edge of the rafter, and we want a 14-degree cut along the top. To do that, you just hold that nice and tight, you pivot off the edge. I've marked 14 degrees there for you. So you can see 5, 10, 15 there, 14 there. We pivot that round, keep that tight on the edge there, and we stop when 14 lines up with the edge of the timber, looking down on it. For you, it's going to look different because you're looking in at an angle. But that's 14 degrees. Strike a line there, and we make that cut. We can now cut that. If you want to be really accurate, you can use a miter saw. I'm not going to. I've got a miter saw, but I'm not going to use it because I appreciate a lot of you aren't going to. There's only one power tool we're going to use, a circular saw, and I'm purposely doing that to keep it simple for you guys, because these are much cheaper than a miter saw. More of you will have one of these, and if you haven't got one, win one on Ultimate Tool competitions. There'll be a link in the description. We give out thousands. In fact, we've given out over 50 grand of power tools, had over 200 winners, and there's a massive kit on this week. One of you lucky winners is going to win this 23-piece monster Milwaukee bundle. We've included everything in this kit that you might need to build a shed like the one in this video, including a miter saw and stand, a Milwaukee pack-out system to keep all your shiny new tools in, and 2 of the world's best nail guns. Now, tickets for this lot are just £1. There's enough here to build your own shed. So head to the link in the description, grab your tickets, and we'll see you on the live draw. So that is what we call a plumb cut. We're going to work from the peak of that cut for the next stage. So tape measure and the rafter length, 1417 that we worked out on our app. That's what we need to mark along this edge from the very peak of the 14-degree cut there. So that rafter length measurement that I've just made down here is along the top edge of the rafter, not the bottom. Now, one thing to remember, if we look down our timbers, we want a crown to sit at the top. So if you think of the apex roof, say that's the apex roof, one of our timbers had a crown in it, so it's slightly bent. You want that crown facing up. The weight of the roof, you want that to compress down on the crown. Right, now what we need to do is work out the bird's mouth so it sits nicely on the top plate, that being the top bit of timber of our wall. That's the measurement along that top edge, the rafter length. Somewhere near that, what you want to do is you want to measure 1/3 of the timber, because we need to remove no more than 1/3 of the timber. It's 120 mil across this timber, so that's 40 mil. Now, if we measure 40 mil there, I'll just leave a little mark at 40 mil. We're working from this top edge again on that length mark there. You've got to be nice and accurate with this. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a 14-degree cut in that direction. So the same direction that our plumb cut goes. So it's going to sit somewhere across there. You can see 14 degrees there. I'll just make that a little easier for you to see. And what we want to do, bring that round to 14 degrees. If you remember, we line that up, looking down on it with the edge of the timber there. Be nice and accurate. Slide this along right on the peak of that pencil mark we made for the length. So we're right on the peak there. I'll move it so you can see. So that's going to be 14 degrees. If we line that up there, perfect. Now strike a line along that top edge. So that sits the same as the plumb cut at the start that we made over there. So this cut here is the heel cut. So this sits on the outside of the building, so whether that be OSB there or whatever, that is the very outside of the building. Now it doesn't matter for me, I'm going to show you how I face this up later on, but that is the heel cut. Now we've got what they call a seat cut that's going to be formed across here, because we need the timber to sit on top of the top of our wall, the top plate. The only two marks that matter are the 40 mil, 1/3 of thickness, and the heel cut there. Lay your speed square at 90 degrees from the heel cut, right on the point of that 40 mil, and strike a line along the top edge. Now remember, this is the very edge of the building. This sits on the top wall. If you had OSB, you'd have calculated that in. If you wanted an overhang or a fascia, let's say this was the thickness you wanted, you'd now just want to cut your rafter somewhere there so you had an overhang. Now we're going to cut the bird's mouth with really good accuracy, because that's important. Heel cut first, up to the 40 mil. Remember, you won't be able to go all the way, you'll have to finish it with a handsaw. Now the seat cut, I've got my saw right on the peak of that. We can see it through the back there. Finish that with a handsaw again. That's our bird's mouth cut. I like to do that first because that just keeps the strength in the timber. Now I'm just going to cut the overhang. There we go, overhang cut. I'm now going to build another one of these, replicate this. Once we've got two, we'll then try them up there. This time we've got a pattern, and that is going to make it somewhat faster. Now we've got two rafters, but we can't just put them up there because we've got no ridge beam or anything to hold them. So now we're going to grab a piece of timber to aid us in holding them while we work out if we've got these cuts correct. So all I've done for this to help me out, I've got a nice long scrap bit of timber. I've got it roughly plumb, it's not perfect, doesn't need to be. I've screwed it right on that center line. And now what you want is a couple of G-clamps. Again, in the description, nice and cheap. Not really any expensive tools needed for this job. And we're going to get those rafters on, and we'll be able to see if we're roughly correct. So hopefully you can see this, because the sun is not really my friend today where it is, but we're going to lay our bird's mouth on there, and you'll see if that's nice and perfect. And then you want to get your bit of timber up there temporarily. You'll be able to see roughly when that plumb cut is where you want it, and then you're just going to clamp it in place temporarily. So I've got that clamped so that I can visually see that it's somewhere close. I've then got the opportunity to check my bird's mouth and see how accurate I've got that as well. So that's pretty good, nice and accurate. You want this hard against the building, or if you've got OSB, of course, you'll have accounted for that. And your overhang, that bit is up to you, because I'll show you a bit later what I'm doing with this building. We're actually going to be losing this, but this is more for reference for you guys that are doing yours slightly differently. This is just a temporary ridge. You can see that's the thickness of our ridge there, 45 mil, and And I've got a little stop that I've screwed to the top because I'm on my own. We need extra hands. So we know we need to bring this rafter up a little bit, but that is actually a good thing at the moment because that gives us room to pop our temporary ridge in. So we've got a little bit of space there at the minute, but once we bring this all in, we won't have. What we can see is that we're very close. So now we can start to make some small adjustments. So let's bring this one in, and already we can see that's better. That's tight up against there now. There's about 1 mil between the ridge and the rafter, so that is what we're looking for. They meet up in the middle, they're the correct height, and our bird's mouths sit really nice as well. So we know we can use them as pattern rafters. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to build another one for this edge of the building, because then once we've got 4, we can get the ridge installed. Now, for demonstration purposes, I've shown you how to leave an overhang and I've shown you how the bird's mouth works. But on my build, I don't want a soffit and I don't want an overhang. I'm just going to face it up. We'll have a fascia, a bit of timber going around the edge, and then we're going to rub a roof over the top of it later on in the series. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut that off just there. So it's in line with that cut there, and we're going to lose that bit of timber, and that will allow us to actually nail on a perimeter and give us the final result that we want. That might not make a lot of sense at the moment, but it will later on. Now we're going to get that centre ridge in, running from the front of the building to the back. So we did an overall measurement of the outside of the front wall and outside of the back wall. Take that measurement and cut yourself a bit of timber for the ridge. There we go, 3182 ridge. Remember the crown, you want the crown facing upwards. It's actually pretty good, that bit of timber. Not much of this timber is, so we'll take it. And now you can see I've screwed that temporary bit of timber on the outside of the building. Of course, we need to account for the overall length. So screw your bit of timber, move that around to the outside. Same on the back there, half the width of the building, just like the front. Make a halfway mark, put a temporary bit of timber up, because you'll see why in a minute. When we get this up, them temporary bits are going to aid us. Same as we did at the front up there, temporarily held in place. Temporary bit of timber on the top of the ridge. That'll free up our hands because we're going to lift this ridge in place now. So imagine having to film this and do it by yourself, because doing it by yourself is hard enough alone. That's a 700 quid DJI 4 Pro, whatever it's called. I've crashed it twice today, just getting it in under this tree. If I ain't got a subscribe off you for that, then you're never gonna subscribe. So hit subscribe, helps the channel loads. It's like a free way of you just supporting the channel. So hit that subscribe button and hit the like button. That helps the video get out there to the masses. Let's get this ridge beam in. So you have to kind of balance it, then you have to get up the other end, and you have to lift it in. We'll make sure it's plumb, we'll make sure it's level. We'll adjust that so that the angle's perfect, and then we'll be able to fix it. So I've popped 2 screws just in here. They're going to come out later. You can see that's all temporary. This is temporary. What we need to do now, check this is plumb, which it is. You can see there, that's really good. So I've got a couple of nails just in on the top just to hold the rafters to the ridge. And now you can get rid of that temporary timber. Right, ridge is in, rafters are on both ends. Right, now you can hear how hot it is out here. I am sweating. We're going to cut every 400, so every 400 mil along the side wall there, we're going to have a set of rafters. So use a pattern rafter now, just like we did before. Make sets of rafters and get them in along the ridge. Now for fixing all the timber in this project, I'm using 90mm straight nails from my nail gun. That's because a nail has a higher shear strength than a screw. However, this is a DIY job and a lot of you won't have a nail gun. You can use an impact driver. Just make sure that the screws that you select for the job are made for construction and they don't snap under high load. I'm not going to show you more of the same because, well, it is just the same. It's exactly what we did at the start. They're pretty accurate. I'm pretty happy with them. Remember, we're not building a house, we're building a shed. You want to get them as close as you can, but they haven't got to be absolutely perfect, especially if this is your first time. Remember, it's a pretty hard job to do, and if you get them close, you've done well. Right, it's a new day. I got far too hot yesterday up and down that ladder on my own. It's doable on your own. And you can do it in a day, but it's far too hot. It's like 30 degrees. I think it's 24 today, so still a warm day, but we haven't got as much to do. We're actually nearly there now. So this roof currently, with these rafters, can just go right? It can move out of the sides. It's not strong enough. What we need to do is put some joists in across, or at least some sort of support in the apex of the roof. So I think what we'll do is we'll use joists to tie the two walls together. I'm not going to go on every single rafter. You would if it was a house, but remember, we're not building a house. Don't shout at me in the comments. This is just a shed. And actually, I'll put a picture on the screen or a video of a shed you can buy and how weak their roofs are. They're not tied together very well at all. So we're using the same size timbers for our joists. I've cut this to 2.8 so it'll sit on the top of the walls. We need to shape this to the rafter. Just lay it against it, draw a little line. I'll cut along that line nice and accurate with my circular saw. Pop the bit of timber back up. I've actually clamped this one because it's a little bit twisted. Nail her in place. So I've got 3 joists in there. Now look how strong this building is. That's all my weight. The thing doesn't move. It has completely tied the whole thing together and stopped those rafters from spreading and pushing against the top plates and pushing them outwards. Now the last thing we need to do to strengthen the roof is pop some studs in, 3 studs on the gable end to stop that end from squashing down. Place the timber in position and just strike a line with your pencil and that'll give you the perfect shape. Slide them into position. Look at that, nice and accurate. Now we can just nail them in place and that roof is now super strong. Now we need to put a fascia on because as it sits, you've noticed I've put my rafters flush with the edge of the building and the gable end is flush with the edge of the building. That means the cladding's got nothing to go up against. So you can see what I've done for the fascia. I've pinned a bit of 5x2 along the sides and I've left the thickness of timber on the front and back for our front fascia as well, which will sit there. Now all we've got to do, make a slightly longer version of our rafter because it's got to come halfway along the ridge and it's got to meet the edge there. But really, it's a nice easy cut, couple of angles on there, and we should be able to just pin that back and that'll make the whole thing look and finish nice for the cladding. That can now just butt up against that and we don't need a soffit, and that also helps with less creepy crawlies and things like that getting inside. Now this will be nice and easy. You've all done rafters now, so this is a much simpler version of a rafter. We know that the degrees are cut on the end. There's 14. All we've got to do is take a measurement, 1, 4, 4, 4. 14 degrees are cut on that end. Bang, bang, nail it on the front so it's nice and flush and it'll look really smart. So as you can see from the drone shot, I've tried to get the fascias nice and neat so all the angles match up and they look really nice. However, it doesn't really matter that much that you can see nails or screw holes or whatever, because rubber roof will overlap down on this. You'll then have rubber roof trims for the water to run off, and the only bit you'll probably see, unless I adhesive it to the bottom, is the very bottom minus 19 mil of cladding along this very edge. So you might see 20 mil, which I'd probably then paint if that's the case. So before we sheet the roof with our OSB, we're going to put this stuff on. This is Rhino Vent. This is a breathable membrane and that's going to stop moisture getting in behind the cladding because we're not going to sheet this with any OSB or anything. It's 70 quid a roll. I'll put a link in the description. So it does add our cost up a little bit, 70 quid, fairly expensive for a roll of this stuff, but it's a lot cheaper than putting OSB, sheathing on it, battening it, and then cladding on top of that batten. So this actually saves a little bit of money, believe it or not, on the shed build. And also, the reason I'm putting it on now, we've got rain coming in tomorrow. Once I've got these sheets on, I can tarpaulin the roof so the rain can't come in. And this stuff will stop the rain blowing in through the sides as well. I'll put a temporary bit over the door until the rain buggers off and we get this heat wave back again. Then we can move on to finishing the roof off. A lot of people will underestimate this stuff and how much of a huge difference it actually makes. It's really easy, you just staple it on. You can see it says this side up and it's got an overlap line. Really, really simple. A little tricky to do on your own. I know what you're thinking. You've covered the window up, and I'll cut around that a bit later, because it's easier to do that than try and cut it out. As you put the wrap on the building, you will need a staple gun for this. I'll tell you what's weird. The wind always gets up whenever I do Rhino Vent. Isn't that typical? Now for the roof deck, All we use, nice and simple, 18mm tongue and groove OSB. All you'll need is a straight edge, track saw if you've got one, but I appreciate a lot of you DIYers won't. You will need a circular saw so you can cut the lengths of it. Right, one of my trademark little drawings, just going to show you how these roof sheets go. It's easier to explain it like this. So say this is one of our sheets, and we got one sheet here, and we got a little offcut here, half a sheet, right? The offcut of this sheet will end up here. And then we'll have a full sheet here and a full sheet here. That way you're half bonding the joints. That makes them nice and strong. With the glue, the whole thing becomes one. Our OSB sheets lay flat on the roof, and we start from either edge of the roof, working our way up towards the middle of the ridge. When you're installing these OSB sheets, because the ends of them don't land on a joist, the easiest way to do it is to fix them together using 5-minute lumberjack glue on the tongue and groove section of each of the sheets. Once this glue goes off, it makes the sheets one. You scrape off the foam because there'll be a little foamy excess come out of the joints, and then those sheets won't go anywhere. We can then move on to fixing them to each of the rafters. I'll be using my nail gun for this, but you can use screws. The only thing with screws is they blister the surface of the OSB a little bit, but you can just use a sander and sand that down. So use whatever you've got to hand. The links to that 5-minute lumberjack glue will be in the description. The last bit of this roof we put in is the section that goes along the ridge. Again, I just nail this in place. So that is how you pitch a shed roof. Now this is ready to have felt or rubber roof, whatever you're putting over the top of it, but hopefully you've learned to pitch your first shed roof. Go away, give it a go. Hope it's helped. If it has, hit one of these videos because they're bound to help as well, and I'll see you guys in the next one.